I never thought I would become the kind of woman who betrays her marriage. I never thought I would be the villain in my own story. I had a husband who loved me, two beautiful children, and a picture-perfect life that anyone would envy. We were the couple people admired, the ones who seemed to have it all. But behind the curated smiles and carefully arranged family photos, there was a secret. A dark, intoxicating secret that stretched across an entire decade. It all started on an ordinary June afternoon. The sun was bright, the air was thick with summer heat, and I was at a corporate conference surrounded by a sea of unfamiliar faces. And then I met him, Daniel. He was tall, sharp-eyed, with a voice that hummed like a slow melody. When he smiled, something inside me shifted. It wasn't love. It wasn't even attraction, not yet. It was a spark, a flicker of something long buried beneath years of routine, unspoken disappointments, and a marriage that had settled into a predictable rhythm. At first, it was nothing. Just polite conversations, harmless glances, and the kind of small talk that meant nothing but felt like everything. I told myself it was innocent, a little excitement, a reminder that I was still desirable, still noticed. But soon the messages started. Late at night, in the quiet of my home while my husband, Ethan, slept beside me, Daniel's words lit up my phone screen like a forbidden thrill. I can't stop thinking about you. I should have stopped. I should have deleted the messages, blocked his number, and walked away before it became something more. But I didn't. The first time we met outside the conference, it was in a coffee shop, a small, dimly lit place where no one knew my name. We sat across from each other, inches apart, yet the space between us burned with an undeniable energy. When he reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, I felt something I hadn't in years, electricity. And that was the beginning. A stolen kiss in the parking lot. A hotel room booked under a name that wasn't mine. A series of nights where I stopped being Ethan's wife and became someone else. Someone reckless, alive, and dangerously addicted to the thrill of secrecy. I wasn't unhappy with Ethan. That was the worst part. He was a good man, a good father. But somewhere along the way, our love had dulled into something comfortable, safe, predictable. And with Daniel, I wasn't a wife or a mother. I wasn't the woman who cooked dinner at 7, folded laundry at 9, and fell asleep in the same position every night. With him, I was someone new. I told myself it wasn't real love. That what I had with Ethan was deeper, stronger, more important. But the lies built up, one on top of the other, until they became my reality. I mastered the art of deception. The perfectly timed business trips, the deleted messages, the well-rehearsed stories that left no room for doubt. I thought I had control. I thought I could keep this secret buried forever. But the thing about secrets is they always find a way out. And when mine did, it wasn't just a crack in my perfect life. It was an earthquake, one that would destroy everything. I never set out to be a cheater. I never planned to fall into someone else's arms. But if you ask me when it really started, when I truly crossed the line, I would tell you it wasn't the first stolen kiss. It wasn't the first whispered, "I miss you" in the dead of night. It was the moment I looked into his eyes and saw the way he wanted me. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as someone's responsibility, but as a woman. It happened in a dimly lit hotel room, miles away from the life I had built with Ethan. I still remember the feel of the cold metal keycard in my hand, the way my heart pounded as I stepped inside, knowing exactly what I was about to do. Daniel was already there, sitting at the edge of the bed, watching me with those sharp eyes of his. There was no judgment, no hesitation, just want. A hunger so raw it sent a shiver down my spine. "You don't have to do this," he murmured, but there was no conviction in his voice. I stepped closer. "I know." And then I kissed him. It wasn't soft or hesitant. It was urgent, desperate, a release of something I had buried for years. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me onto his lap, and suddenly I wasn't the woman who made school lunches and paid electricity bills. I wasn't the woman who wore a wedding ring that had started to feel like a chain. I was someone else. That night, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Every touch, every whispered word, every breath against my skin ignited something inside me, a fire I had convinced myself had long since burned out. And the worst part, I didn't feel guilty. Not then. Not when I walked out of that room, my hair still tousled from his hands, my lips still tingling from his kisses. Not even when I went home to Ethan, who kissed me on the forehead and asked how my business trip went. Because for the first time in years I felt wanted, and I wasn't ready to let that go. One night turned into a second, then a third, then a routine. I became an expert in deception, deleting texts before Ethan could see them, using business trips and late meetings as my cover, sneaking out in the middle of the day, finding pockets of time where I could slip away unnoticed. The rush of it was intoxicating, the thrill of sneaking around, of knowing I had this secret life that belonged only to me. Daniel became my escape. When I was with him, I wasn't responsible for anyone but myself. I didn't have to be strong or reliable or predictable. I could lose myself in him, in the way his hands traced my body like he was memorizing every inch of me. "You like this, don't you?" he had whispered once, his breath hot against my ear. I had only nodded, because it was the truth. I loved it. I loved the stolen kisses in empty elevators, the way he would press me against a wall in the dim glow of a hotel hallway, whispering things that made my knees weak. I loved the secrecy, the danger, the way every moment felt like we were walking on a razor's edge. But more than anything, more than the passion, more than the thrill, I loved that when I was with him, I wasn't invisible. Ethan used to look at me that way once, but somewhere along the way, the fire had died, and I had gone looking for it elsewhere. I told myself that what I had with Daniel wasn't real, that it was just an escape, a fleeting indulgence that didn't mean anything. But then one night, as I lay beside him in a hotel bed, my fingers tracing idle patterns on his chest, he whispered something that made my breath catch. "I love you." For the first time, I felt the weight of what I had done. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a game. It was real. I should have ended it then. I should have walked away before it spiraled even further out of control. But I didn't, because I knew, deep down, that I wasn't ready to let go. One evening, I came home later than usual. My skin still carried the faintest trace of Daniel's cologne, my body still buzzing from our last encounter. Ethan was in the kitchen, pouring himself a drink. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "Busy day?" he asked. "Yeah, I lied." I turned away quickly, moving toward the bedroom before he could see the guilt in my eyes. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly imagined, was that Ethan had already started watching me. And that was the beginning of the end, because I thought I was in control. I thought I had mastered the art of deception. But the truth had been catching up with me this entire time. And soon it was going to destroy everything. The moment I stepped into the house, I knew something was wrong. Ethan was sitting at the dining table, a nearly empty bottle of whiskey beside him. He wasn't watching TV. He wasn't on his laptop. He was just waiting. For me, the silence was suffocating. "You're home late," he finally said, swirling the glass in his hand. His voice was eerily calm. Too calm. I swallowed hard. Yeah, work ran over. A lie. The same lie I had told 100 times before. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Is that so?" Then he reached for something on the table, a thick manila folder. My stomach turned to ice. "Sit down," he said. I didn't move. "Sit down." I did. Then, slowly, methodically, he flipped the folder open. My entire world shattered. Inside were photos. Me and Daniel at the hotel, in his car, at the coffee shop where I thought no one would see us. Screenshots of our texts. Bank statements showing every hotel charge, every dinner bill. Evidence. Undeniable. Inescapable. My mouth went dry. How long? Ethan's voice was hoarse. I could have lied. I could have softened the blow. but there was no point. 10 years, I whispered. Ethan exhaled sharply. Then, out of nowhere, he laughed. But it wasn't a real laugh. It was hollow, broken. 10 years, he repeated, shaking his head. His fingers tightened around the whiskey glass. Then, before I could react, he hurled it across the room. Glass shattered against the wall. I flinched. Jesus Christ. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal, like a man who had lost everything. Ethan, Shut up. My heart pounded. I had never heard him sound like this before. He turned to me, his eyes burning. Not with sadness, not with pain, but with something colder, sharper, more dangerous. Do you think I'm stupid? He asked, voice deathly quiet. I swallowed. No, of course not. Because I've known, he cut me off. My breath hitched. I've known for months, he continued, since the night you came home and moaned his name in your sleep. My blood ran cold. At first, I didn't want to believe it, he said, shaking his head. I thought no, not my wife, not the woman I built a life with. But then I started watching, noticing, the lies, the little things. And you know what, sweetheart? He leaned in close. You are a terrible liar. A sickening realization crept over me. Ethan, what did you do? His smirk was razor sharp. Oh, I had time to think, he said, leaning back. And I decided, why should I just confront you? Why should I let you walk away with even a shred of dignity? He grabbed another envelope from the table and slid it toward me. I hesitated. Go on, he taunted. Open it. With trembling hands, I did. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, asset transfers. My heart stopped. I moved all the money 2 weeks ago, Ethan said conversationally. Everything's in my name now. Oh, and the house? Turns out I never added you to the deed. Oops. I couldn't breathe. You can't do this, I whispered. His eyes gleamed. I already did. Then he reached for his phone. By the way, you might want to check your inbox. Your boss just got an interesting email. Panic slammed into me. Ethan, no. Oh, but yes, he said mockingly. All those business trips? The company card? The timesheets that don't quite add up? You're not just a cheater, sweetheart. You're a liability. My job, my reputation, my entire career, gone. You bastard, I choked out. That's rich coming from you, he shot back. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling to check my email. And then I saw it. The email, the attachments, the subject line, confidential evidence, employee misconduct. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was ruined. I looked up at him, my vision blurry. Ethan, please don't do this. We can fix this. He barked out a laugh. Fix this. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. You broke this, sweetheart. You broke us. And now, I'm just making sure you feel every bit of the destruction you left behind. Then he stood up and grabbed something from the counter. A key. Pack your things, he said. I didn't move. I said, pack your things. You're leaving. Tonight. Tears burned my eyes. I have nowhere to go. He smiled, slow and cruel. Not my problem. Then he opened the front door. The cold air rushed in. The silence stretched between us. And that's when I realized he had won. There was nothing left to say. I stood up on shaking legs, grabbed the key, and walked out the door. I don't know how long I stood there, the wind biting at my skin, my entire world collapsing around me. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't scream. He destroyed me with precision. And now, for the first time in 10 years, I was truly, utterly alone. The night air was sharp against my skin, but it was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my chest. I stood outside the house I had once called home then. The walls were thin, the flickering neon sign outside casting an eerie glow through the window. I sat on the edge, off-weight of my own destruction, pressing down on me. The door had closed behind me with a soft finality, not a slam, not an outburst. just a quiet, deliberate gesture that told me everything. Ethan wasn't just done with me. He had erased me. I had nothing. No home. No money. No job. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, desperate for something. Anything that could anchor me. My screen lit up with notifications, each one another nail in the coffin. Email from HR. Urgent. Immediate termination. Employee misconduct review. Bank app notification. Your account balance is $0. Text from Ethan. Don't even think about coming back. My breath hitched. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But it was. The man I had lied to, cheated on, and betrayed for a decade had burned my entire life to the ground. And he had done it so cleanly that there was nothing left to salvage. I tried calling Daniel. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. A cold dread settled in my stomach. No, he wouldn't abandon me. He wouldn't. I texted him. Daniel, call me. Please. I need you. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, and then nothing. I stared at the screen in horror. The man I had risked everything for, the man I had ruined my marriage for, had just gone silent. Had he known? Had he seen this coming? Had he decided that I wasn't worth the trouble now, that I was no longer a secret, no longer an untouchable fantasy, no longer off limits? Panic rose in my throat. I tried calling again. Still nothing. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for breath in a reality I had never prepared for. Because for the first time, I understood something. I had never been in control. I had never been the one with power. I was just a game, a pawn in a story I thought I was writing. And now I was nothing. I don't remember how I got to the cheap motel. I must have walked for miles, dragging my suitcase behind me, my heels clicking against the pavement in a rhythm that felt like a countdown. To what? I didn't know anymore. The motel clerk barely looked at me as he handed over the key, muttering the room number like I was just another lost soul passing through. I stumbled inside, locking the door behind me. The room was small, suffocating. The air smelled stale, the walls yellowed with time. This was what I had now. This was my new reality. I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. I had spent 10 years believing I could have it all, that I could have my husband and my lover, that I could lie and never be caught, that I could control the narrative. But the truth was, I had been living on borrowed time, and now the debt had been collected. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw Ethan's face. Not the rage, not the revenge, but the hurt. The way his voice had cracked when he asked me how long. The way his hands had trembled when he pushed the folder toward me. I had destroyed him, and in doing so I had destroyed myself. I reached for my phone one last time, a tiny part of me hoping, begging, that Daniel would have messaged back. He hadn't, and in that moment I knew. He never would. I was alone. Truly, completely, irreversibly alone. And I had no one to blame but myself. The cheap motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and desperatio the stiff mattress. Staring at my phone, willing it to light up, but it never did. Daniel was gone. Ethan had erased me, and I had nowhere left to go. For the first time in 10 years, there was no one waiting for me. No texts to delete, no excuses to craft, no double life to manage. The weight of it all pressed down on me, heavier than I had ever imagined. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the one who had control, the one who made the choices, the one who lived without consequence. But now, I had nothing. A sharp knock at the door jolted me upright. My heart pounded. Had Ethan sent someone? Had Daniel changed his mind? I approached the door cautiously, my pulse drumming in my ears. Who is it? Silence. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in years. It's Megan. I froze. Megan. My best friend. Or at least she used to be. Before I pushed her away. Before she started asking too many questions about my late nights and sudden weekend trips. I hesitated, shame creeping up my spine. Then, finally, I opened the door. She stood there, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You look like hell," she said. I let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, well, that makes two of us." She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the dingy room, the single suitcase in the corner. "Ethan called me." I tensed. "He told me everything," she continued, folding her arms. "Told me what you did, what he did, how he took everything." I swallowed hard. "So what? You came here to gloat?" Her expression softened. "No, I came here because, despite everything, you're still my friend, and you look like you need one." I let out a shaky breath, emotions I had buried for years threatening to surface. "I don't deserve your pity," I whispered. "No, you don't," she said bluntly, "but you need a damn wake-up call." I looked away, my throat tightening. "You lost everything, and you know what? You deserved it, but that doesn't mean you have to stay down." I frowned. "What are you saying?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm saying you have two choices. You can sit here, wallowing in your self-pity, waiting for someone to save you, or you can start clawing your way back up." The words hit me like a slap, because she was right. For years, I had lived in the illusion that I was in control, that I could play the game without consequences. But now I was at rock bottom, and the only way out was up. I stared at Megan, something shifting inside me. "What do I do?" She exhaled, finally taking a seat on the bed beside me. "You start over. No shortcuts. No lies. You take the consequences and you own them." I let the word sink in. Starting over. It sounded impossible. But wasn't that what I had always wanted? A fresh start? A new life? Maybe this was the price I had to pay for it. I straightened my back, meeting her gaze. "Help me." For the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in my own reflection for years. The cheap motel room felt suffocating, its walls pressing in like a punishment I couldn't escape. The silence was unbearable. No messages, no calls, no way to fix what I had broken. I had lost everything. My marriage, my home, my career, my dignity. I used to believe I was in control, that I could live two lives and never face the consequences, that I could be both a devoted wife and a reckless lover, spinning lies so perfectly that no one would ever unravel them. But secrets don't stay buried forever, and when the truth comes crashing down, it doesn't just destroy you. It consumes you. For the first time in a decade, I had nothing left to hide behind. No one to blame but myself. And that realization, it was the most painful of all. Sitting in that motel room, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror, I had to ask myself the one question I had been avoiding for years. Was it worth it? Was the thrill of secrecy worth the price I paid? Was the passion of an affair worth the devastation it caused? Was losing the man who had once loved me unconditionally worth the fleeting excitement of someone who, in the end, had abandoned me just as quickly as I had betrayed my husband? The answer was clear. No, and it never had been. A message to those who think they won't get caught. If you think you can have it all, think again. If you think you're smarter than the truth, you're not. The moment you cross that line, you set fire to everything you once held dear. And when the flames finally reach you, there's no going back. If you're unhappy in your marriage, talk. If you feel lost, seek help. But don't make the mistake I did. Because when you gamble with love, with trust, with someone else's heart, you never win. You only lose. And sometimes you lose everything.